These days, it can be hard to trust the media. What's true, what's fake, and who is behind the message? I'm a freelance journalist and videographer who has spent years studying the media. Now I'm taking a look at what local, regional, and national news stories mean to us here in North Central Washington. I'm Dominick Bonny, and this is Common Sense. Hello and welcome to episode 50 of Common Sense. I'm Dominick Bonny, and in this episode, we're going to take a look at the Wenatchee Valley YWCA, an organization with a bold, optimistic, and altruistic mission, eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. The organization runs a low-barrier shelter in Wenatchee and a thrift shop on Wenatchee Ave. I met up with Executive Director Rachel Todd recently to learn more about what they do for our community.
I'm the Executive Director at the YWCA of North Central Washington here in Wenatchee. Our mission, so the YWCA mission nationally, is to eliminate racism and empower women. And locally, we are following that mission and carrying it out by economic empowerment and education of marginalized groups. Here locally, we mostly work with housing insecurities and folks experiencing homelessness. So we have 3 housing programs. We've got an emergency shelter, which can house 10 people, a transitional housing program, which can house 10 people, and then a small apartment building with 7 apartments that can house, 7 to 14, 18-ish people. And we're part of a broader community-wide housing initiative called the Community Housing Network that other organizations are part of too, like the Women's Resource Center and Community Action Council and Catholic Charities and some of those other folks as well, to work towards ending homelessness within our community. So that's probably the biggest piece of the pie that our organization does locally. And then we also do a fair amount of outreach and education around issues like LGBTQ awareness and anti-racism awareness and education. And our programs manager, Dusty Mahoney, does work with organizations doing like intro to diversity, equity, and inclusion within staff groups and team members. So,
and tell me a little bit more about your shelters and how those are low barrier.
So, our shelters, our emergency shelter is the kind of the lowest barrier shelter that exists currently in the greater Wenatchee Valley. We're the only emergency shelter in the community housing network in Wenatchee. And what low barrier means really is that there are no stipulations to coming and living in our shelter. So that means that we don't require a urine analysis, a clean pee test. We don't require people to be any specific religion. We don't require people to be any specific sexuality. We do only take women and femmes and children in our shelters. That includes trans women and their dependents up to age 18, male or female, or non-binary, up to the age of 18. And we also ask that people practice sober living while they're in our shelter and are able to abide by our good neighbor policies, because our shelter is the definition of communal living. And so we have 5 bunk beds in a big room, so it's 10 beds altogether. And so if people need to be isolated or alone, our shelter is probably not the best fit, but we make accommodations as much as we can for folks. Sure.
So would you say, probably your shelters are the best bet for somebody who might be trans or...
Yeah, definitely. So we have housed in our emergency shelter and transitional housing a number of trans women, and we have gotten feedback from them that they have been kicked out of other shelters. I don't know which ones, and I don't want to bring anybody down, but we do have a really affirming and open policy. So our 2 housing staffers are both really well versed in trauma-informed care, kind of advocacy-based case management. And so each person that comes into our emergency shelter gets to have targeted weekly case management with one of our housing staffers. And that means that they get to sit down individually with them and talk about the things that they need, and getting resources in place so they can move towards safe and stable housing, or safer and stabler housing than emergency shelter. And the city of Wenatchee is building a emergency shelter model based on, it's the same model that's in Moses Lake. And that is going to put a whole new set of beds out there for people who need them, and that also will be really low barrier. It'll probably actually be lower barrier than ours. One of the issues that we face is that our building is over 100 years old, and our emergency shelter is on the second floor. So people have to be able to navigate a set of stairs to be able to access our shelter, which, you know, are all things that we're working with and all things that we're trying to currently problem solve to make it more accessible. But there are really few options in this greater valley for like truly low barrier emergency shelter. That's why we say we're the lowest barrier, but we also recognize that we have barriers inherent to our system that can make it hard for people to access.
Sure. Yeah. Is there, you know, I guess there's this pervasive attitude because Wenatchee's growing, but it still has a small town feel, small town vibe.
For sure.
And I think there's a lot of folks who think, well, maybe these issues are for bigger cities or for bigger communities, metropolitan places where there's a big, diverse group of people.
Yeah.
Do these folks exist in?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, they absolutely exist in our community, and I would say even more so, bringing out a broader scope even further than you know, focusing on a trans community. A broader LGBTQ community exists here and are in need of services just as much, if not more, than other folks in our community. One of the things that we also experience that is really difficult to find resources for are folks who come in with what we call dual diagnoses. So folks who have a chemical dependency and some other health issue, whether it's physical or mental or intellectual. It can be really difficult to find resources for folks in our community because of those comorbidities. I'll tell you a story. This is something that happened to us this last summer. In our permanent supportive housing apartments, we can serve everybody, all genders. So we have men, women, children, anybody, because they're in apartments. And one of our apartment residents had gone through a really traumatic time in his life. His spouse had passed away. He has, a chemical dependency and a comorbidity of an intellectual disability as well, and they disappeared. Right, so this person just disappeared. We didn't see them. We do have targeted case management with our permanent supportive residents as well, and it's really based on what they need. And so we were checking on this person regularly, making sure that they were, eating and whatnot. And they disappeared, and we had no idea where they were. We didn't know if they were in a hospital, in a behavioral institute, or if they were out just on the streets. And this is a person that really can't make healthy decisions for themselves out on the streets. And since they were, a lot of things snowballed, and we couldn't find them. We couldn't get information from hospitals to say whether that person was there or not because they're an independent adult. We couldn't get information from behavioral places to see if they were there or not because they're an adult and we're not their guardian, and it took us 6 weeks to find out where this person was. And we finally found them through basically connections, networking connections.
Sure.
We didn't find them through any official way. We found them, and luckily they were safe. They were in a institution getting stabilized and healthy, and were released back to their apartment. But since then, since that person has been released back to their apartment, it has been a eye-opening experience trying to find resources for this person who is not quite dependent enough to be admitted to a care facility, and they don't have the money to pay for what's the word I'm trying to think of, like a retirement facility, right? Somewhere where they have a bed and somebody's taking care of them. So this person is deemed too capable for that, but they're really not really able to live independently. Yeah. And so trying to find a caregiver who can come and check in on this person, and us trying to make sure that their med management is appropriate, and making sure that they're getting to their doctor's appointments and all of that stuff. We ideally don't spend this much time per week on one of our permanent supportive residents, but this person, if they're not living with us, they're going to be homeless again because of the gaps in systems and care. So that is one thing I will say that has been really eye-opening for me since I started here and for this job, is that there are a ton of resources in this valley. There's a ton of resources in this valley, but they can be really hard to access for folks. And if folks are experiencing homelessness on top of trying to access resources, it's an impossible task. So they're spending their whole day trying to figure out where they're going to sleep that night, or how they're going to get food, or what shelter they can go to get this resource, and what shelter they can go to get that resource, what office they need to go to sign up for Apple Care, and what office they need to go to sign up for food stamps, and all of the different things. It's a full-time job.
Yeah, it's like what do they call it? Sisyphus.
Yeah, it is.
Rolling the rock up the hill.
It is.
Feet.
Yeah.
It's impossible. It's meant.
It is.
Almost to be impossible.
It is, yeah. I know that since this scenario with one of our residents happened this last summer, we've been working really hard with other organizations and other care coordination organizations like Action Health Partners, to try and identify ways to make sure these cracks get smaller so people don't fall through them quite as easily. But it is an uphill battle, and it's really important that organizations like the YWCA exist, because we are the folks that are advocating for people, and we are the stability that is able to advocate for people when they have too much else going on. It's super important. Otherwise, we would be in a much different community. And the thing about Wenatchee is it's growing. It does still have a small town feel. And in my experience, anytime that we have reached out to the community for help, this community has shown up, thrice. They've shown up in abundance to help us with, whether it's when we need food on our pantry shelves, or we need help. We do a giving tree every holiday season for all of our residents and clients who can't afford to, buy Christmas presents for themselves or for their family. The community really responds and really shows up for those people. And so this is a strong community, and it is a really generous community. And I think that a lot of times these issues are just not told. The stories aren't told. And I think if if the broader community knew these stories, it would be a different story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to talk about one of those stories a little later, but first which is the HVAC, the air conditioning that Randy Zielinski helped out with. But first, let's take a walk around the space and kind of show me the thrift store, because the thrift store is one of the ways that you generate revenue for.
Yeah. So this thrift store, it helps us generate revenue to support our programs. It also, do you want me to keep talking?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. It also serves a need in our community because we do clothing voucher programs. We partner with 13 and counting agencies in the area to give out $30 clothing vouchers to folks in need, and they can come and choose anything wearable for up to $30. We give out about $2,000 to $2,500 a month in inventory for people who need shoes or whatever. But we also, so this is our thrift store. You can see in this side is kind of the women's clothing. We are pretty lucky. We have more donations than we know what to do with. So we have a really generous donor community who brings us lots of good stuff. This side is kind of men's clothes and winter apparel. We also have hard goods. We've got everything that you might need in the kitchen, including small appliances like Instapots. And all of our small appliances are tested before we bring them up, so we know that they work. We've got crafting supplies, vinyl, we've got books, we've got VHSs, pictures, sporting goods. I got myself a pair of rollerblades here last summer, which was pretty great. And we also we're working on right now, we swapped out our Halloween stuff for, we're working on building up all of our Christmas stuff. And I will say that one thing I have learned, since I've never been in charge of a thrift store before, but I will never pay full price for Christmas decorations ever again. Yeah. We have so much holiday stuff that is in really good condition that I will, including entire Christmas trees.
Wow.
So
very cool.
Yeah, so don't waste your money on the Target full price, even though they're really cute.
Yeah.
You know, make sure to check us out because we have so much. And then we have an entire section of kids clothing from infant all the way up to preteen. And then once it gets into the teenage sizes, they go into our adult sizes. So this is our thrift store. And then downstairs, we also have furniture. So we have everything outside of like appliances. We don't sell washers and dryers and things like that, but we accept everything and we also sell everything.
Very cool. And folks can volunteer to help?
Yeah, we're always looking for volunteers. We have a really small staff at our thrift store. They are small but mighty, but any type of volunteering, any type of time that folks can donate to help us is always really, really worth it. You know, things as simple as going through the racks and making sure there's clothes in the right sizes, in the right spots, all the way to people working in the warehouse alongside our warehouse lead and pricing items before they come up to the floor.
Very good.
Yeah, we always are looking for good folks to come help us.
Yeah, awesome.
Stay tuned for the rest of the interview after the break.
You're in Ford Country, land of Pat Armstrong, Ford Lincoln, home of the lifetime warranty. That'll sure get you thinking.
Get ready for fall and winter with a new or used truck or SUV from North Central Washington's four-wheel drive headquarters, Pat Armstrong Ford Lincoln, on 3rd Street in East Wenatchee.
Land of Pat Armstrong, Ford Lincoln, you're in Ford Country.
I'm here at the Discovery Center at Rocky Reach Dam, where there's a ton of cool stuff to do. You can learn how the dam harnesses the power of the Columbia, walk inside a Native American Thule lodge, and steer clear of disaster on the Rock Island Rapids. You can check out the new fish viewing space and even stare a salmon right in the eye. Explore all this and more at Chelan County PUD's brand new Discovery Center at Rocky Reach Dam, now open year-round.
911, what is the address of your emergency?
Yes, it's me. It's my husband. I think there's something the matter with him.
It was a feeling that I'll never forget, like being able to meet them and know that he survived.
Okay, tell me what's happening. Is he conscious?
No, he's not. He's not.
Okay, take a deep breath for me. I'm getting you help.
Rivercom means to me that I still have my husband here with me. They're the ones that guided me through saving his life.
Who are you talking to? I told you, knock it off!
End the cycle. Call SAGE, Safety, Advocacy, Growth, and Empowerment. Get private, anonymous counseling. Learn how SAGE can help you. Receive legal assistance and protection. SAGE also offers a safe place for you and your children. Of course, a hug from Hank always helps. SAGE can help you move on with your life. Call SAGE today.
Hello and welcome back. Let's get right back to my interview with Rachel Todd, Executive Director of the Wenatchee Valley YWCA.
This is this used to be a church, this building, and was sold to the YWCA in the 50s. The sanctuary no longer is standing. It's where our parking lot is now, but it's a over 100-year-old building, and it now houses our offices and also our two of our housing programs, our emergency shelter and our transitional housing program. And since it is such an old building, as you can see, it's all brick. And that means that there is there's a different heating and cooling system. There's a different furnace for each floor, and we have 3 floors in this building. And this last summer in June, around June 19th, I'm sure everybody remembers when it hit 117 degrees, our cooling system for our top floor, which is where our emergency shelter is housed, died. It just completely died. It wasn't pumping, it wasn't even able to use cool air. It was barely even pushing air through the vents at all. So it was really, really hot. And luckily, we were able to find 3 window units, because also all the window units were sold out as well. We were able to scrounge around. We found 1 in our thrift store and 2 from some really generous community members to put in the windows of our emergency shelter to bring it down to about 87 degrees instead of 100 degrees in there. But then we also were gifted some money from the Confluence Rotary Club, the foundation. They gave us $3,000 towards a new heating and cooling unit for that floor. And then in addition to that, the city of East Wenatchee, and it really was spearheaded by Rob Tidd, who's involved in everything, but he always has us kind of at the top of his mind. The city of East Wenatchee received a bunch of money from the federal government for the American Rescue Plan, and that money is intended to be infused back into the community to help revive places that were affected by COVID, and we certainly were. And so they were able to provide us with the rest of the funds that we needed to replace our heating and cooling units for our main floor and for our top floor into more efficient units and units that are warranted, so that we have some years to fall back on the warranty. If anything breaks, we don't have to worry about it too much. And unfortunately, that work wasn't able to be completed until like 2 weeks ago because of all of the manufacturing and the shipping delays. But we did finally get those put in, and the money from the city of East Wenatchee also allowed us to install a new security camera system on our building. I mean, that's one of our new cameras. They're camera system that we had before had really grainy picture. You couldn't see nighttime pictures at all, and was so out of date that security companies wouldn't even be able to work on the system that we had because they didn't have those parts anymore. So now we have a new security camera system, which is really important. We do sometimes find ourselves in situations where we need to be able to provide footage to law enforcement. We also need to be able to see, like, in times we're not here, if there are altercations. It's really good for us to be able to have that quality of picture, and it has made a huge difference, actually. It's made a, well, in addition to the new cameras, to the better quality of picture, we also had an expert from Keyhole Security walk around with us and set up better angles. So now we have a more 360 view of our whole building. So if there are things that happen, we can see it now. It's not like just out of reach.
Sure. Wow, very cool.
Yeah.
So I mean, so this is a story about you and federal dollars being infused not only to help marginalized people, but then Keyhole Security gets a contract.
Yeah.
So it helps our local businesses.
Yeah, it really does.
Gives them work.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's win-win-win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really what those dollars are intended for.
Right.
I'd like to thank Rachel for her work serving folks on the margins of our community. The folks who fall through the cracks. And as you can see, folks do fall through the cracks here in our community. If you'd like to learn more about the Wenatchee Valley YWCA and support them in their mission, go to YWCA.ncw.org right now. I'd also like to thank the folks here at NCWLIFE for giving me the opportunity to highlight what I think are some of the most important issues in our community and the entire region. Over the course of the first 50 episodes, we've traveled from Wenatchee to Omak and spoken with veterans, addicts, recovering addicts, parents, retired teachers, police chiefs, pastors, nonprofit, and community leaders. I believe that I have shined a light on some of the greatest and not so great characters in our community. And I know a few episodes have upset some folks, but that's okay because we can't have accountability and transparency without asking uncomfortable questions from time to time. The last thought I'll leave you with at the close of this 50th episode is a quote from a small-town journalist and publisher of the twice-weekly newspaper in Storm Lake, Iowa. His name is Art Cullen, and in 2017, he won a Pulitzer Prize for what the judges called writings, editorials fueled by tenacious reporting, impressive expertise, and engaging writing that successfully challenged powerful corporate agricultural interests in Iowa, end quote. Cullen's philosophy on journalism is the correct one, in my opinion, and he summed up that philosophy in a letter to his son, who after college decided to return to Storm Lake and take up his father's mantle as a newspaperman. Here's his advice, and although he's talking about Iowa, he could be talking about any state in the union, including ours. Quote, a pretty good rule is that an Iowa town will be about as strong as its newspaper and its banks. The best journalism is that which builds communities, Cullen wrote. You build your community by publicizing good deeds done, by reporting on the cheats and scoundrels and other politicians, by urging yourself and those around you to do better and allowing dissenting voices to be heard, and by making certain that your town's issues are heard in Des Moines and Washington. Use your power to build and the newspaper will grow naturally, end quote. Use your voice and build the community. The world will become a better place. That's the way I see it. I believe that's just plain old common sense. If you're a regular viewer and tuning in for these last 50 episodes, I hope you continue to watch. But most of all, I hope I can live up to the standards set by real deal journalists and columnists like Art Cullen. That's it for this episode. I'm Dominick Bonny. Join me next time for Common Sense.
Opioids are now one of the leading causes of injury-related deaths in Washington state. More people die from overdose than from car crashes. Between 2012 and 2016, more than 3,300 lives in Washington were lost to opioid overdose. We are all part of the solution. Your choices matter. If you are prescribed an opioid pain medication, talk with your doctor about other options, and don't share your prescriptions with other people. It starts with you. Learn more at getthefactsrx.com.